Welcome to the first lesson and module of Ask for What You Want. This is where we are going to step through the first pillar of OKPAL. So that is O, and it stands for own. Own your conflict style. So in this first step into the realm of asking for what you want, you might be confused to see me talking about conflict, although perhaps you know that I'm a mediator. But you may say, okay, thanks, but I don't get into conflicts. This doesn't apply to me. To which I say, oh, really? Because a conflict is not necessarily fisticuffs on the street or even raised voices or an argument, but it might be some situation in which you feel disagreement, or that you're not happy with what is being suggested, or that perhaps your boundaries are being breached, or that you feel you would like to put a point of view across but don't feel comfortable or able to do so. All of those are, in a sense, the seeds of a conflict. And when we understand more about our conflict style, then we're able to prevent conflict by taking measures in advance. So this, for me, comes in two stages. And the first stage is to ask us about our own personality. So the lesson here is to recognize that it's not personal, but it is about personality. So the situation, the difficulty, the disagreement may not be personal. We often think it is. We think that the other person is doing something to be difficult, but often it's about personality. And we can start by asking ourselves about our own personality. What is my personality type? So you will see here my disclaimer. Please use this lightly. This exercise is about curious self-inquiry into interpersonal differences. We're not here to do diagnosis or science, and nor am I. So I'm not going to be diagnosing you or anyone with a personality type. Really, the purpose of this is to understand that there are just different makeups. Often we get stuck into this sense of, on a principle, the other person should know or should do. And we do that from our own personality type. But if we can acknowledge that other people have different personalities, then we can save ourselves a lot of strife. So there's a book that you may have come across called Surrounded by Idiots. So I wonder, do you sometimes feel like you are surrounded by idiots? If only people were more like us, wouldn't life be easier? And this book uses the DISC personality types to look at 4 very individual ways of being a person. So we're going to look at 3 models, just lightly, casually. You can then use your assignment space in the workbook to reflect on, where do you see yourself? I don't know about you, but I used to love personality quizzes in magazines and so on and so forth, because there's something useful about being able to reflect on ourselves. So the DISC personality types suggest that some people are more in the dominant zone, which is a mixture of being task-focused and kind of active on the front foot. And these are the red personality types, who can be direct, decisive, doers, but also sometimes seen as domineering or demanding. Then we've got the yellow types, who are sort of influential, and they're a mixture of active on the front foot, but also people-focused. It's to do with this relationship between what's more important, the task or the relationship. So here, these people can be seen as inspirational, interactive, interesting, but also impulsive or irritating to others sometimes. Again, take this lightly. Let's go round. The green personality type is steady, stable, supportive, sincere, but can be seen as slow or sometimes too sensitive. And that's arising from their real people focus mixed with a reflective rather than active way of engaging with life. Lastly, we have the blue type, which is seen as compliant. They're reflective people who focus well on the task, but maybe less so on the people. They are compliant in that they are cautious, careful, conscientious, but can be seen as calculating or even condescending. Again, some of this is just about acknowledging that we have an inbuilt kind of judgment mechanism in us, which is about assessing and seeing some people as better or worse. And we want to try and kind of like bring that to the surface and gain an awareness of it. That part of us is meant to keep us safe. It's meant to help us be aware in our circumstances. So we don't want to be judgmental of our own judgmental traits, but we want to be aware that sometimes that's under the surface of our consciousness. So perhaps you can ask yourself, where do you see yourself in these quadrants? Are you a red, a yellow, a green, or blue? And most people are a mixture. And that mixture changes in different circumstances and in different relationships. So in reflecting on your personality type, you might think about the other person that perhaps you're focusing on in this course, the other person or situation, and just without diagnosing or without judging, say, are there areas where we overlap? Are there areas when we just have a very different approach to tasks or to relationships or to taking action or to reflecting? So I thought I might share with you mine. I did a DISC assessment from Surrounded by Idiots. It used to be free, and I've just checked, and actually now you have to pay for it. But anyway, I liked what it said, and I share this just because, it's interesting to learn from each other. Arabella, you are cautious about treading on toes. You may sometimes be hesitant to act, even when you're right. Making demands on others in your environment may be challenging for you. It would be unfortunate to offend the wrong people. I have to say, it's not a bad description of me. So what I take from this is that there are certain areas that I might want to turn the volume up on or just sort of put into balance. But this is all just for data. Let me give you a second personality type that you might enjoy as well. I'm sure you've heard of it. Some people rave about it. Others just say that this is not science. I will say, as long as we're doing just quizzes without a qualified person, this is not science. But perhaps you've heard of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Now, for me, this was actually a kind of crucial step for me in terms of my career. So I had thought for many years about becoming a mediator, and it always seemed like something that would fit for me. And I don't know, 7 or 8 years after I'd bought my first book on mediation and read it and put it to the side, I came across the 16personalities.com free personality test. And I came up as the mediator. I'm an INFP. And it felt like such a validation of a part of myself that I felt I was aware of, but I didn't know whether that was valid or not. So it was a considerable factor in my deciding eventually to do my initial training as a mediator, first of all, as a community mediator, because I felt kind of like my impulse or my sense of myself had been made clear by this. So I have used this, invited people to use this test if they feel like they would like to in my work. I don't always, and it depends on the case. But if I ask one party to, then I invite both parties to typically, and they can share it with each other. And I can just tell you, this has been a really helpful way of people explaining to each other who they are, how they tick, and why their behaviors and their needs from each other are as they are. And people can say, I see, I didn't realize you're a logician. Okay, well, I'm a campaigner, and that's, sort of similar but different. And no wonder we found it difficult. And how is it that you work? How is it that I work? So again, it's about finding these little ways to get above the situation or the disagreement or the kind of stuckness or the void that it might exist, and get to know each other a little bit better. Now, assuming that you are in a situation where you're wanting to ask for something of someone else, don't worry about them, but do have a think about your personality type and how you can best speak for yourself. I noticed that there's also been developed, and I'm afraid I haven't got the source here, although I'm sure it's in this blog, personalityclub.com, a Star Wars version of Myers-Briggs. So Myers-Briggs were the people who devised this personality type. 16personalities.com is a provider of a free quiz and much more information. But perhaps if you're a Star Wars person, you will relate more to one of these characters. So again, let me just show you mine. Again, this came from the 16personalities.com site. So Arabella, a mediator, introverted, intuitive, feeling and perceiving is what INFP stands for. And you can see I've got some great strengths: empathetic, generous, creative, open-minded, passionate, idealistic. To be honest, that kind of resonates. I can be quite passionate about things. And the idealism, you see the picture here of the woman sort of skipping through the flowers. And I once had a very dear boss say to me, in Arabella's world, everyone would hold hands and skip through a field of tulips. And I remember thinking, why not? Isn't that what everyone would want? But what I was being shown by him and I guess by this test is that there's a bit of an idealism in me that can also get quite hurt. So let's come over to the other column of weaknesses, where it says that I can be unrealistic. And that has been the case in the past. I'm now much more aware of it. And self-isolating, unfocused, emotionally vulnerable, desperate to please, and self-critical. And I think of my younger self, and I think, I do relate to that, and it caused me some unhappiness, and I centered that unhappiness in the behavior of other people, or the way the world is, or how life is. But understanding that this is part of who I am gave me much more agency. I mean, if it's me, then that's something I can work on. But if the rest of the world is like unfair or unkind, then suddenly I'm a victim of that. So this is where looking at my personality type helped me calibrate a bit more. So when I got very upset, then I might say, oh, golly, perhaps I was being unrealistic, and I've got better at asking other people about what I think should be the case. And, does that resonate with you? Is that, or is that sort of in my sphere of being a little bit hopeful and idealistic and just being able to measure a bit better? So that's the second of the personality type profiles you might like to look at. And then another one that is has been very well documented and researched is the ocean personality types, or at least sort of spectrums. And ocean stands for our openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Neuroticism being maybe a bit of a sticky word, but what I like is I've just come across recently the Prism Ocean, which in kind of gives the for each of those traits a kind of two ends to the spectrum. So are you more practical, or are you more open? Are you more responsive or more conscientious, more introverted, more extroverted, more strong-minded, more agreeable, more mellow, more nervous? And I'll just go straight and show you my results. So I have to say, for the free personality test that they did, and I've put the link here, and I'll put it in the workbook as well. I was pretty kind of down the middle of the line for most of the questions. That may have been the mood that I was in. But certainly what stands out, and you can only just see it slightly shaded, the sort of lozenges are shaded on each of those lines, but you can see that I'm quite high at the end of conscientiousness and agreeableness. And you might think, that's because I'm such a kind of thoughtful, lovely person. But actually, those conscientiousness and agreeableness can be coping mechanisms. They can be safety mechanisms. They're things that you know, can lead to burnout in me and in others. So it's not to say that any of these are better than the other. Okay, and I think that's probably the most important lesson for OKPAL Pillar 1, Own Your Conflict Style. That is that there is no style that is right or wrong. There may be expressions of how we are that are unacceptable, but there is no particular way of managing conflict that is for us to condemn. If we have a complex way of managing conflict, that is likely because of our life experiences, our childhood, what we've seen, what we've been modeled, and it's all data. And with data, we can keep what we like, and we can start to dispense with the parts of ourselves that are not helping us. But also, hopefully, we can understand that the other people in our lives are also made up of different traits, some of which are helpful to them and to us, and some of which are less helpful to them and to us. So we don't need to be teaching to anyone or telling anyone else about their personality. This is just about opening ourselves up to this notion that everyone is doing their best with the kind of different component parts that they've arrived at this stage in life. So at this point, you're welcome, if you'd like, to go to your workbook, and you can try out any of the tests if you like. If this doesn't resonate for you, then please don't. But one way or the other, reflect on what you know about your personality type. Who are you? You're an amazing, wonderful, unique human being, and you're different to others. So what is it that makes you different? And if you want to, you can also reflect on the other person's personality type. Forgive my lack of apostrophe in this slide here. You know, if you can do it with a certain distance, a certain sort of relaxation, just observing, yeah, they are more on that end of that scale. They're more like this, more like that. Then we're just gathering data. So once you've done that, come for the next module, which is lesson 1B of Own Your Conflict Style. And that is going to be looking at more specifically, what is your conflict style? Thanks so much.